Hello, everyone. We're your hosts, Beth Orr,
And Bridget Querns.
and welcome to Click Moments and Passionate Pursuits, the Unfolding, where intuitively guided conversations are followed with feral faith, enthusiasm, and joy, bringing new insights, inspiration, and perspectives along the way. And today, we're actually starting with last week because we've got some unfinished business. So I cannot wait. I am so excited. We have not talked about what we have unearthed and discovered much. And so we're really excited to kind of talk about the details and the specifics of what happened. So, to refresh you, in case you weren't um, somebody who actually listened to the last podcast, what we were doing is we were talking about the web, and we were talking about this energetic connection and how we have themes, and we have situations that tend to show up with the people closest in our inner circle. And so we decided that we were going to kind of play around with it a little bit and see just how much it does show up. And so Bridget and I chose a theme, an object or a phrase, and we shared it with each other to see how it would show up in each other's lives. And then we had one that we did not share that we're going to share today to see how it showed up. So that's what we're going to start with, and then we'll just go from there. So, Bridget.
Yep. So my item that I brought up was orchids, and Beth's was Wim Hof. And so I will say that for me, it was really interesting because this showed up in a few different places for me: the Wim Hof method, ice baths, breath work, and things like that. I was listening to a podcast, and I had been listening to this specific episode of this podcast for a few days, but I didn't get to the part in the episode where they mentioned Wim Hof and ice baths until after you had brought up that that was your thing that you were putting out into the energetic web. So I turned the podcast on, and of course they start talking about it, and I'm like, oh boy, here we go. It showed up at least 3 other times for me in various places. One from a health influencer who I listen to and follow. Another through a really interesting connection, which is an individual who we've been talking about partnering with or working with for a sponsorship. And her husband is a very big proponent of Wim Hof method. And I had no idea about that until we got into talking about this person and then about what Beth had put into the web. So that was my experience of how that showed up for me. What
Did
about
you
you?
also have orchids show up for you? I'm just curious.
Interestingly, no,
Yeah,
not at
yeah.
all. Nowhere. And not that I
Isn't
was,
that interesting?
but that was what I put out. And I mean, it was like they hid. Like I didn't see a single mention, the word, the flower, nowhere, which is,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is what happened for me. I first of all, with orchids, it started right away. So especially like the first 3 or 4 days after you mentioned orchids, they were starting to show up. So it started first with a picture. Now, mind you, my mom had brought all kinds of pictures from her house that she was going to get rid of and was sharing. And so she had this whole box of photos, and I had taken one photo out of the box of all the photos and had put it up on my board, but I hadn't really looked at it since I did that when they were here a month ago. And so I happened to look at it a couple of days, well, actually, it was the next day after we talked, and I realized it's my grandmother and I, and at the orchid show, and those are orchids in the
Yeah.
background, at the orchid show in St. Louis. And so I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. There's orchids. And then right after that, I went to look for how many business cards I had left that I had just printed out. And I recognized that I had printed out, when I went on a retreat, I printed out 10 business cards that were not what I was going to use, my branding, but I didn't have my branding done yet. And so I had one of these cards tucked in the back of my other cards still left. That's it, just one. So it's like vintage now. and
Oh
it's
my
of orchids. I started laughing. I was like, oh, I forgot I was like, this'll be fine, and I chose them. So that was on there. And then it was just like maybe 3 or 4 more times. Like it was like a screensaver would pop up that had it, like a randomly rotating screensaver, and I'd never seen that particular one. Or the screensaver on my TV had it up. So it was like random things like that. And then as far as and then I also noticed that a friend of mine on her Instagram feed had like 10 photos in a, section, and like the seventh photo was of orchids.
God.
And I was like, oh, interesting, because they're not in season. So it was like it was actually a picture that she had taken of the past, and she had posted it in there. So I was like, cool. So it showed up. And then Wim Hof, I didn't expect to show up, but actually showed up twice.
Hmm.
Um, both times in something that I was watching online, and they just randomly showed up, like Wim Hof's face
Oh,
as like somebody that was going to be a part of a panel discussion. And I noticed him and I was like, oh, interesting. I never see him on here, especially as part of a panel. He's usually by himself doing something. And then the second time, it was showing somebody doing exactly what you described, like an ice bath. And like this person was a proponent of doing it every day, and showed the container that they had for jumping in every single day to participate in this. So I was like, huh, okay.
interesting.
Yeah. So how about your one that you didn't? I can't wait to see if
The
it
one
showed up
that I didn't,
anywhere.
the one that I didn't say, and this will be interesting. It was like a green paint spatter or spill, like something like purposeful.
Okay. Well, yes. I will say that that has come up twice. I did a painting. I did a acrylic kind of airbrush kind of painting where it was like taking color, and did this at Art Play, which is a local business here uh, that I participate in and love. And I did this and I loved it. And so that picture has come across all week. If you look on my website under my Zoom calls, there's that picture, which I gave to a friend of mine. That picture is actually the image that I use. So you'll see that image. And so for the viewers, you can see the image underneath there also. And also yesterday, oh my gosh, yesterday I showed my supplies to a friend, which I haven't even gotten those supplies down for a while, that I used to do that painting, and said, I want to start doing this again. And it happened to be a friend of mine that I did a polar plunge with in January.
Oh, that's weird.
I didn't even think about it until right now. I was like, and we were doing Wim Hof. We were like doing the motions at that polar plunge in January.
That's really funny.
So, so yes, I actually did see that. Um, so my topic was a phrase, and it was when pigs fly.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, so I like what brought it up was is I saw a pig with wings, and it made me think about that phrase, or pigs, or pig with wings,
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
So here's what happened last night. So my kiddos are like always getting bumps and bruises and cuts and scrapes, and they're just roly poly. Um, so I had some like triple antibiotic ointment. And for some reason, I thought it'd be fun. Like I was joking with them because they were upset. One of them had like a scrape on their knee. And I'm like, come here, it's okay. We'll put some ointment on it. Get it? Ointment. I mean, like so random. Like it wasn't connected to anything. Like there aren't pigs here. There was no reason why, I just kind of pulled it out of and that's where these things really show up, is when like it's just a nudge. Like you just pull it out of the ethers and you're like, where did that come from? And it's that energetic web of like, you're like, oh, this one. And it just
Yeah.
comes out. I'm
Ooh, I
trying to think
love that.
of any other like pig. references or events. This is the hard part about doing this, is that I have a terrible memory. So to go back over the past week and try to figure out if I saw or thought of pigs anywhere is gonna be difficult. And like, what if they were really obvious and I just didn't notice them because
Sure.
I wasn't, paying attention or thinking about it. That's so funny.
Well, I do think it's interesting though that we both had a hit on it the night before we were going to meet.
Yeah. Yeah, because
So it
then
was almost like the closer we
I
were,
would not
it
have remembered
almost is
that.
right, but it almost suggests to me though that the closer, it's like even though our energy did not get any closer,
Mhm.
technically,
Yeah.
the time got closer.
Yeah.
And somehow it brought what was swimming around in there for today into each other's sphere in some way.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting.
It's interesting.
Hmm.
Cool.
Cool. Thanks for that. That is awesome. And what I hope to do is for listeners, you're going to be getting this 3 weeks after we have this whole conversation. We would be interested in knowing from you if these themes came like into your life when we originally did them, which would be the beginning of July, beginning second, third week of July. So we would be interested to know, did these themes come up for you at that particular point, pre you even knowing that it was a thing? Or now that you've listened to it, when this actually airs, did you start to see those images once you knew about the images? So we would love to hear, because we're like just being curious and trying to figure out more about what's happening and how it happens. It's just an excitement.
I do want to mention this too. So I was taking notes on things that stuck out more than usual over the past week, just in case they were the thing.
Mm,
One thing that I saw was there was a guy standing on a corner. Now you see these a lot of like the street corner prophets and proselytizers, but this guy was holding a yellow sign, bright yellow sign that said "All souls matter."
mm,
And I was like, that's not the typical message you see them holding. Usually it's like, repent now. But I was like, that really stuck out to me. And it almost felt like a message, like a universe, like the universe was like, this is a message for you. Like, I want you to see
yeah.
this because it's
Mm,
aligned with who I am and sort of my mission in the world. And then I had these two or three. So this was really weird. It's rare that I see a purple vehicle, but these were purple, like custom iridescent purple, like the color shifted when they drove by. One was like this purpley pink and they were iridescent. And the other one was purple and it was like purple and green and it shifted from purple to green like as they drove. It was really cool. And I mentioned it to my kids. I'm like, this is weird. Like we don't see purple cars a lot, but that was really odd that we saw those two in such a short amount of time. And I'm like, who put that out there? Because that was really interesting. Um, I feel like there was something else as well that I saw that I wanted to take note of. But did anything like that happen for you?
yeah, it did actually. So you saying that, I didn't necessarily put it on the same, I didn't come up with the same type of thought around it, but I did see like an iridescent um, experience with
Mm.
hummingbirds. And my grandmother, she comes to me in hummingbirds. And I had these hummingbirds come by me and they moved in such a way that I was like, wait, 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 was that like pink and purple? Or was that green and blue? Or was that indigo? And I kept like looking at it going, ooh, when the light hits it, it kind of shifts colors. And what are you? What color are you? And I kept looking at it just really closely. And um it just would, but it was noticeable. I even had that term iridescent, which isn't a term that comes up very often,
Yeah.
kind of come to my mind. And this was 3 days ago. So that, I think that's interesting. Um I had, because we did, for the listeners, we did a bonus video this week, and there was a fox that came up. I had a shirt that said Fleet Foxes, which is a band. And all of a sudden I said, oh, the fox is going to show up. This is really going to show up. I'm going to be looking for how this is relevant. And then the fox, like, I can't even begin, like 10 times, I can't even go over all the ways that the fox showed up. But then it was also in the background of a video that I just put out onto my Click Moments podcast, episode 5. It was the background to James Nave and my conversation. So just super interesting how many times foxes showed up, like a real fox. Like, what? A real fox? Like, pictures of foxes, people mentioning foxes, foxes in the background. It just was fascinating how many times it showed up. And then lastly, I will comment on your All Souls Matter. That did come up for me. It's a passion of mine that we're all struggling with something. We've all got something, like we're all here and a little bit disoriented and just trying to figure it out. And I have this tremendous compassion for suffering and a distance from peace. And so when I hear that all souls matter, it reminds me that it's not just the matter that we have here where we talk about people's experience in this world and this life with each other. It's like bigger than that. It's this it's this belonging that is way bigger than just here, within ourselves and each other. And so that's been something that's really been on my heart. And so showing up in a compassionate way and really listening from a compassionate lens. And so this All Souls Matter really, not just as an opportunity to tune into ourselves, but to really see other people through a lens of suffering and repair.
I remembered the last one. So right before my kiddos and I headed down here, we're visiting family. We got gas at a Costco, and for some reason we had to pull over. I think it was one of the kids needed to be buckled up again or something. So we pull out and we pull into a parking lot I've never pulled into before. It was the REI co-op is right in front of Costco in my neighborhood. We pull into the parking lot of the REI co-op, and I turn the corner and I look to my right, and there is a license plate, and the license plates have been showing up like from states that I've never seen license plates from. And this one is from Hawaii, and it had a giant rainbow on it. And I was like, Beth.
Mm,
And I saw it and I
mm,
immediately thought of you, and it just made me smile because, first of all, Hawaii, I've never seen a license plate from Hawaii before. I'm in upstate New York. Like, come on.
right.
And second of all, the big rainbow, like it just made me so happy because I was like, oh, Beth, it's a rainbow.
Yes. And it's funny too, because I've reconnected with a friend of mine who lives in Hawaii. And so we've just been connecting this week. So that's funny that that would come up too, because it's been on
Almost
my mind.
but we were like, it was chaotic and we were about to leave for a really long drive. And I didn't even say, I couldn't even get a picture because I pull up and I noticed that they're in their car and they're trying to back up. And I had stopped right behind their car.
Wow. Okay.
Letting me see your license plate.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
so that was fun.
That was fun. Yeah. Thanks for playing. That was great. And I hope that the listeners enjoy it too and enjoy kind of, I really am serious about wanting to hear how things come up for you and then also what your take is on it. You know,
Yeah.
part of what we're wanting to do is to open up a dialogue and get us all thinking about what's happening and to share and learn from each other. So we hope to hear your experience and your thoughts around this. So
Yes, please. Yeah. So our other area of topic that we wanted to dive into today is the concept of spiritual partnerships. And what is that? What does that look like? What is it like to be in a spiritual partnership and all the nuances surrounding that?
yeah, and it's such a new topic for me, I will just say. Like I've understood that there are people who come into our lives at different seasons and that there's different ways that we're interacting and healing and learning and all of that. But I've never really considered it to be like a spiritual partnership or like, which suggests almost like a conscious decision, but also my understanding is, it's more, it's deeper than that. Like, it's more of a, you recognize that somebody's part of your spiritual team, this team beyond us, and we keep showing up in themes in each other's lives, and we can either accept, which is the partnership and the conscious decision, or we're like, we're like, peace out. And if that's the case, then it's still something to learn, right? It's always, no matter what the experience, it's always something that's still something that you signed up for.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
So how long have you known about this, and what's your just basic understanding of spirit teams and partnerships?
I guess this is a relatively new topic for me. It's something that came onto the radar sort of as I've been in this spiritual awakening, coming into a better understanding of what I believe and purpose and meaning in my life and in my spirituality. So I really couldn't put a finger on when it showed up for me the first time, but I guess it got introduced as I was exploring the idea of multiple life cycles. And we can call it, reincarnation or whatever you want to term it is fine. It doesn't really matter. But the idea was that we would have a sort of a core team of individuals, of souls who we stick with, who we partner with, or agree to play different roles throughout our incarnations. So even though we may not be aware of who these individuals are, they come into our lives in ways that are important and lasting over many cycles. So, for example, um, my brother and I could have been brothers in this life, could have been neighbors in a previous life, could have been, I don't know, warring kings in a life before that, like just individuals who are in each other's orbit and who play important transformative roles. And I think the important thing to note is that we are catalysts, or we bring about change or transformation for each other. So we help each other evolve forward over lifetimes. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be an incredibly loving relationship every time. It could be a very divisive relationship also. But any catalyst, we may label positive or negative, is a catalyst that causes change or evolution or transformation. So in the long run, all of that is good. It all
Mm.
brings about some progress, some forward motion. So that was my first dip into it. And then I got curious, of course, and I was like, well, who could be on that team? Like if I have this team, and it could I mean, anything is possible. Let's just put that on the table. Anything is possible. So this could be a thing or it could not. I don't know. I don't have the answer. But it could also be possible that these individuals could be past or in spirit and still working with me closely on my team. But I just wanted to know. I get curious and then I want to know more about it. So I just was holding this curiosity of, oh, I'd really love to find out who my team is. And
Hmm.
that's sort of where I've been for the past probably like good 6 months or so, of just wanting to know and wanting to connect and desiring to have a better understanding of that and really calling those in. Like that sounds like a really fulfilling type of relationship to have a spiritual partnership. So I want that. Like I want to be that for people, and I want individuals who want to be that for me as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. So I like what you're I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, and I like what you're describing. I've never thought of some of it in that way, but I love that you're talking about like that in the last 6 months, you've started to really think about that more. And I think there's so much power to calling it in and saying, I'd love to figure out who my team is. I think we probably can't underestimate how critical that is to conscious awareness here in this lifetime to who actually is part of our team. So as you were starting to talk, I was thinking about, well, you're describing that we have awareness of some of our spirit team and we're unaware of some of our spirit team, but they're still around us. So for me, I did not know that my grandmother was part of my spirit team, this larger team, until after she passed. And so it's been about, 9 months now that I've been aware that of her role, and it's only been in the last month or two that I've understood that she was my main spirit guide and that she's somebody who's been with me a long time, right? We roll deep with each other. And so, but I also know that there's probably other people in my family that I suspect and friends that have come into my life that are also part of my spirit team. But I haven't been aware in life that they are.
Yeah.
And I haven't asked like you did in this life to know. I haven't even thought about saying, oh, yeah, I'd like to know who I'm part. Like I've wanted to affect and positively interact with people's souls and vice versa. But I haven't necessarily said who's part of my spirit team here now and can we hook up? Like, can we make this happen? Can we like connect, and be catalysts for each other's lives and other people. And so I feel like what you're describing makes me think that maybe this is some of what we're trying to put words to. And because what we've said is this is really hard to have it feels like I feel like I have inadequate language to describe, like even spiritual partnership or you being part of my spirit team doesn't feel like I'm like maybe like it's so inadequate like to describe it. And so it makes me feel like it's a little bit pre-verbal, like it's like I don't necessarily have the language or understand it all yet. But what I do know is that it feels like it's not just this passing, like knowing, you know, it feels like there's this intention, there's something that's like, it feels like when we met that it was like, oh yeah, oh my gosh, you
Yeah.
like, woo. It feels like there's this recognition that's like, I don't know who you are, but you got good energy and we know each other.
Yeah. It wasn't until you described it that way that it connected for me that I've talked about loving my kids in that way
Mm,
and how you love a child who is your child in this way that is like there's literally nothing that they could do that would cause me not to love them. Nothing. It's this it doesn't make sense in the way that we frame love in our limited vocabulary. But the only way that I can possibly make a little bit of sense out of it is by saying that it's sort of more of a um divine sacred type love. It's
mhm,
just this very um not self-serving, very selfless love. Like child, there is nothing that you could possibly do that would make me not love you. I
mhm,
completely gave myself to loving you the moment you were born. It
mhm,
just it just is. Um and so I know that's going to sound really strange applying that same concept to our relationship, but it feels like the closest thing that I could grasp to that sort of makes a little bit of sense. And
Yeah.
again, inadequate language. Really inadequate language.
Well, and what's I think what is important and interesting is like what we're describing is something that isn't something either one of us have experienced before, which is why we don't have a chord of language to put with it. So there's nothing that we can pull from. And so where it's inadequate is that it's like its first chord. And
Yeah.
so, so it's like, oh, maybe it's this and maybe it's this and maybe I can describe it this way, right? And some of what we're doing right now is trying to
It's like
describe it, right? Like we're
trying to
trying to create the
know
chord.
that this exists. How do you
Yeah.
describe a color you've never seen before? It
Yeah, exactly. Right.
it's not purple, it's not red, it's meh.
Right. Yeah.
You need to create new language. Yeah.
But what's interesting is like when you describe it like that, somebody when you describe, oh, when I first, first had my child, it was just like this love that I felt that was people are like, yeah, of course. Like, like people are like, yeah, that's what it's like to be a parent, right? For parents that have had that experience, they identify with it. So it's a chord that already exists in the world. It's well known. We can look at it and go, yes, that makes sense. But it doesn't make sense with somebody that you met 3 months ago or 2 months ago, right? It doesn't make sense with somebody that you just met that you have no previous relationship with, that jump into a podcast together and creating like it doesn't make sense to you or to me or to other people because there is no other chord like this and we're trying to describe something that is currently to us indescribable, right?
Yeah.
um so I do think there's something to, I don't know, there's something to just the curiosity to keep being open and not to be so like stuck on what, if the language doesn't quite feel it right yet, it's still being formed.
Yeah.
It's gonna, like, we could probably go back to this several times and still be trying to figure out like, but what we will want to do is to try to find language here. But what's interesting is if all you've got that you pull from that makes sense to you is your children example, and in the scope of other possibilities and ranges of examples that are already here and existing, that was not what was chosen. That's not what it is.
Yep.
Right? Like you even describing it that way, I'm like, it's more likely, like I'm like, what's some working theories? In another life, since we think that we knew each other in another incarnation, we were in a parent-child like relationship together. Who knows?
Yeah.
Or who knows? Right? But what you do say and then what doesn't get said because it doesn't fit all matters. You didn't choose something because it's not accurate. And so when somebody else chooses something that says, oh, well, maybe it's this and it doesn't fit you, then that's not it. And if this is what you have so far, like to me, what I knew was this wasn't like anything that I'd experienced before. And I just trust. Like
Yes.
I trust the universe. And when my intuition says move forward, move forward.
Yep.
If it's an emphatic yes, I do it. And I don't question it anymore. I really don't. I'm just like, I can't not, it would be a betrayal of who I am as a person to not follow this because it's from the divine.
Mm.
And my no means that I'm scared. I don't know. Like this is me trying to control the situation. But when it's an emphatic yes, that's the universe saying, you don't need to know the outcome. You don't need to understand this. That's cute that you're trying to put language to it, but unnecessary, but just move forward, you know?
It's funny, that's a phrase I use all the time now. When something just doesn't quite fit, I'll go, "Oh, that's cute." Like,
Right.
I feel like that's the way that exactly like how you described it, where God or the universe is like, you're so cute. You have no clue."
Yeah. But look at her trying. She's
Uh,
trying so hard. And I can't figure out half the time if who I like, I feel like part of who I am is actually I joke when I say that because, you don't want to take something so seriously or need to have answers so much that you lose just what it is.
Yep.
Like by focusing on it too much, you can lose what it is, the essence of what it is, right? But I also feel like it's how I'm strown and how I'm built and how I'm wired is to try to put language to things because I feel like it's all important and not important at the same time. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any mistake to the fact that I have degrees in journalism with a minor in English and a major in secondary education for English. Like
Mm,
language is what I do.
mhm,
So the language person has no language for this. I don't
mhm.
think there's any mistake there.
Right. Yeah. So what I also think is interesting about this is like it almost feels like okay, imagine going across multiple lifetimes and you're clicking along and you're doing relationships and you're just doing things and then all of a sudden it's like awareness of
Mhm.
something. It's like to me it's almost like we have these moments. I know what it is. Okay, you describe interesting. You describe I always think that birth and death were closest to the veil. And so we are literally the closest to the divine in those moments, right? So we have like birth and we're like, oh, in fact, I just saw this video before we got on where this family had this baby and it was the grandfather and with the baby on his chest and everybody was like on the couch and laughing and so pure. And I was like, oh, like God is all over that. Like all this doesn't
Mhm.
even matter. And we get reminded just how precious life is when there's a birth. And then when somebody's leaving, we remember and we wake up and we are like, oh my gosh, we're doing this thing. And it's so startling that it reminds us that we're here. That's what it was like when we met. And that's why I think you're describing. I'm sitting here I'm thinking of my grandmother because she's the most recent death. You're sitting there putting it in language of your children because that's the thing that's the closest that you can think of. But what it is it's a moment that you know is divine. And although we knew about birth and we knew about death, we did not know about this. And we're like, what's this?
Okay. Have you read the book The Giver?
Mm-mm.
Lois Lowry? Okay. So if anyone has read it or seen the movie, there is I'm gonna condense this as quickly as possible. There is a giver and a receiver. So it's this dystopian society that has sort of stripped away feelings and emotions, even to the point of stripping away color. So the society is people only see in black and white. They're emotionless. They take an injection that creates a lack of emotion, that everything is just very black and white and cut and dry. It's simple. And in the society, each of the children at a certain age receives a job. And this one child in the society receives the job of the receiver. And there is an older individual who is the giver, and the giver holds all the memories that the society has lost. So all the things they've taken out of the society, all of the emotion, all of the concepts that they judged that were too hard to handle, all of the difficult stuff that humans wrestle with, the giver holds. And every so often, the giver has to pass these on to the receiver, and then the receiver will become the giver. So it's like this person holds the library of all human emotion and experience. So Jonas, who is the receiver and the giver, he decides that it's not right that society doesn't have this. It's not right that society lives without, in essence, color. And he wants to figure out a way to return those memories to society. And eventually, what he does is escapes the bounds of the society. So it seems as though he's dying, and in him dying, he's giving back all of these things because he no longer holds them, they're released. It's not quite clear if that's what happens or not, but what happens is he leaves and these things start to return to society, and it's this sudden like what is that? Like when you see when he receives the memories, he reacts to them in the same way. It's this there is no language that exists anymore to conceptualize these things, and yet they are. And it was just like that. You saying that reminded me, it was like a memory that we didn't know we had, but then when we receive it, it's there, and it's something, and it's a new thing, and it exists. And now we're just trying to figure out, well, where does this fit now? This is a thing I didn't know was a thing, and now I have it.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting, and of course, I'm gonna go get this book. And try
Quick,
I'll,
easy.
even though I know the ending, I'm still gonna
Kids.
read it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm just thinking about that and thinking about how it's that no language, and it's like it just really resonates with me that you can't try to give it like trying to say, is it this or it's like when you instantly know what it does remind you of, then we instinctually have the language for what it's closest to, but not quite it. But that also means that what we don't say is also not it. It would instinctually pop up if that's what it was. So it may be a few strokes, it may just be a few pieces of it. But I think honestly, like it feels more like part of the unfolding, right? I think that's a beautiful language for it is um that it there might be 15 more pieces of information that need to come through before you even get a closer picture. But it also makes me then ask, what else is divine and close to the veil that we don't know has that quality of memory without language?
Mhm.
Like, what else is out there? Like, there's birth, there's death, there's now divine relationships, meaning in our waking awareness, finding somebody that's part of our spirit team, right? What else is there? You know, like there are definitely these moments in our life where we feel connected to something beyond us, really peaceful, and this sense of belonging that goes like that creates like this peace that we so overuse, but it's something so different, than what we experience often.
I think Rob Bell hints at this in one of his episodes about what's the next step of evolution.
Mm,
He talks about how things are evolving and things are becoming more cohesive and sticking together in new ways. Um, and how like we're starting to share more things collectively. And so what is the next step of this evolution? Everything is everything else. Like where do we go from here? And you can trace evolution backwards, but it never has stopped, so it's still continuing. So he explores that concept, and I think that this this thing that's unfolding, this thing in the air, as he puts it, I think this is part of it. I think it's doing relationship, it's sharing this experience in a way that we haven't before, but we're moving towards.
yeah, I love that. I think that it makes me think about something that I do in some of my work, and I talk about what if we prepared for everything that could go right instead of preparing for all that could go wrong? And what it feels like to me is that when you look around, if you're in these circles where there are so many people like waking up and like going, like what's happening and what are we doing and how, like, this is important. And maybe it's the pandemic, really spurred this realization. Like, there's nothing like you might die that really makes people say when you think you might die, or it's the birth death thing, right? When somebody is born, you're reminded of how precious life is, and when somebody dies, you realize how yours is going to end. And so when you are confronted with these moments where you realize you're alive, then you actually want to do something with your life, like that's meaningful, like that's not just like the basics, and you suddenly have less tolerance for or desire to participate in the little things when you realize how this is all happening, right? So I'm wondering if it's not like, kind of what's next is, as it's almost like the web that we're all a part of is changing. And so that communication far away is affecting all of us in our local webs. And so the language is actually, in my mind, pivoting to the positive and pivoting to a really beautiful way. Now we may see out here in the world all the, because that the aggression is like roar. It's got so much to say. Like it's the quality of fear to be in your face and to be volatile, and that's our news, right? And so, or you have this other, very quiet, very still, very peaceful, very connected, very I see you, I'm with you. You have that energy. And that energy isn't on, this broad stage going, you've got to feel peace. That's just not the quality of what we're talking about. So I think what's next is you have, like, to me, I can jump on the, or I can be here, but it's like we have this choice. We have literally we have this choice.
Yeah. I sort of saw it when you were describing that as like the web has come online, like the infrastructure was there, it was all built, ready to go, but it's getting electrified like a little bit at a time, like it's coming online. And
Mm,
I don't know, like in my neighborhood, all these people are waiting for what is it, green light internet to get connected so that they can
okay.
into this new higher like fiber optic internet. I feel like it's like that. Like this web thing is like that, where it's like, okay, the web is always there. The capability for it has always been there, but now all of a sudden it's coming online. And when some people get online, it's like, whoa, holy upgrade. And it really works well. And in other places it's kind of spazzy and not working quite as well just yet. But it's part of that forward progress and that evolution is that it's going to like look at how much technology has evolved since we were younger. Like I was writing essays on a typewriter, taking the bus downtown to pull microfiche to do research, and now
You
this.
you probably said so much in that one sentence that somebody who's under 20 is like, "What?
Yeah.
What's microfiche? What do
Yeah.
you mean? What are we pulling from where?"
Yeah.
I got questions. Yeah, truth.
now Now this instantaneous communication across distances with very
Right,
little lag in time. We didn't even know that was possible.
right.
I didn't know that was possible, and yet we're doing it now. So, what do we not know is possible, and yet we're doing it? You and I are doing
Well,
something that some people don't even know is possible.
right. Yes. Well, yeah, exactly. And that's where I think you if you've never experienced it, you put it in language that makes sense to you. So, but also when I got the visual of two visuals. Number one, I saw like the way you were describing it was like something that was there, the infrastructure is already there, and then all of a sudden it was like it gets a little pulse and then it gets another pulse and it kind of goes again, and then all of a sudden it's pulsing more, and then it gets more and more vibrant, and all of a sudden it's just working, right? Like the cogs and everything is just like working. And so, and then the second image I got was of us all carrying cell phones that are charged and meant to connect. Like my phone, think about this, my phone connects me with anything I need. I mean, my phone literally, you want to know how to make, cabbage soup? Do it. You want to talk to your mom in Florida? Do it. Like, you want to find a random person in Portugal to have a conversation with? Boom. Like, my phone connects me to everything. As this source is waking up, what is it doing to my brain and other parts of me as a species that we say that our brains are more strong or have more capability or faster than the biggest supercomputer, which that to me sounds like rubbish. But supposedly it's true. So if this computer that we perceive to have more capabilities than ourselves is vibing with us, how is that affecting our natural inclinations and capabilities to connect with each other? If its job is interconnection and we are interconnected beings too, we have to be matching in some way that is pre-verbal and beyond our understanding.
And that's what evolution does. Evolution creates the physical infrastructure for something to be possible in anticipation of that thing. And then that thing starts to happen because the infrastructure is there, it's been created. That's exactly what evolution has done throughout millennia of history.
So what you're saying is we're being prepared.
Yeah. And that we're already seeing this next step of evolution actually playing out in real time. That I strongly believe that what we're describing is a nonverbal communication that is evolving.
Yeah. And what's interesting is as we're talking, I'm like, technically we're always evolving, whether we know it or not. And the question is are we evolving in a way that serves us as a collective life force, or are we evolving in a way that contributes to our demise?
Both. It's both. It
Yeah.
has to be both. Something has to die off as this other thing is coming online. Like, we don't see all of those species that preceded us. A lot of them are not here anymore. Some
Yeah.
of them are, but a lot of them aren't. So it's both. I think it could be both. I think that humanity as we know it, this specific iteration of it, may be dying off so that this upgraded form can take its place. I think that's exciting.
It is exciting. I'm a helper by nature. And so it's exciting, but it's also like I have this desire, this deep desire in however I'm encoded and however I'm made. I have this deep desire as a person who identifies with that. I know what it's like to feel like we can be left behind or in the darkness and to have to find your own way out. And I have this deep desire for other people not to be stuck there.
Yeah.
And I also know that we can only do so much for ourselves and others, but yet it doesn't stop me from wanting. I think that's part of the biggest reason why I want to share information is because everybody's at a different place in their journey. And, I think you've said that before, you take what, resonates and let the rest of it go. And I think you hear on your journey what you need to hear. Um, but we need to say things to have it have an impact in whatever way it lands.
Well, I'd love to throw an example that we recently started talking about as we were
Sure.
discussing past life experience. I
Hmm.
love to bring up times where we float a theory and then
Mm,
we decide, maybe that's not it at all. Maybe it's something that we didn't think of." So I'd love to hear people say, I might be wrong about everything that I'm saying, and I'm aware of that. I'm saying it because I'm a verbal processor and I enjoy having these conversations. But I'm also human, and so everything that comes out of my mouth may be dead wrong. And I'm willing to acknowledge that, and it kind of
yeah.
excites me because I want to constantly be learning and growing and changing, because growth is change and it's good. So we had said that maybe we were brothers in this past life, and we talked about this gazing experience where I saw a scene and I thought it was myself as my soul observing this scene, and I thought it was you that I was seeing because it was you who I was experiencing this with. But then you posed an interesting question, which I'd love you to share.
Yeah, I just got to thinking, because I didn't see anything. I was just an open kind of portal for you to be able to see, what you saw, but I didn't see anything. So I was only listening to what you saw and then responding to that. And what you saw was a man's face right underneath the surface of the water, drowning, sinking. And then you saw a woman pregnant on a cliff. So you basically saw two, maybe three people, like the baby, right? So you saw them. So those are the only people that you saw. And so my question to you was, what makes you think we were brothers when there weren't two men in this scene? And how do we know which person you were and which person I was? Or if I'm just in it at all, or if you're in it at all? Like, how do we know that? What if I wasn't just a portal for you to reflect on something that had happened to you, or vice versa? But how do we know it was this?
Exactly. I don't know.
And we don't know. Other than in that moment, it felt 100% right.
Right.
Like, other than in that moment, it did feel right. And so I'm also aware that sometimes something intuitively feels right and we get our mind and we become cerebral with it. But what was interesting to me is why the question that I had was, why was something so sure that wasn't seen or understood? And again, just goes back to that nonverbal experience. It doesn't mean it's not true. It just means I'm asking the question, like, huh, curious,
Yeah. And
you
something
know?
that I thought of in this moment that I just wrote down was, what if what I saw was an allegorical scene that was something that carried healing that both of us needed to receive together?
Hmm. Yeah,
Well,
beautiful. I
received
love that.
from that vision and from sharing and talking about that, there was a lot of healing that happened that weekend.
Yeah.
So it doesn't diminish the healing that took place by saying maybe that wasn't a past life at all. I still
Mhm.
carry this wonderful healing in this experience that we shared, whether it was or wasn't. Um,
That brings a great point, that it's again, it's what it did and how it served a purpose, and it's not what it was that was important.
yeah,
It's what it did.
yep,
It offered a space of healing. And I think it gets back to, I'm really excited by what you just said about the growth and change. And I am so committed to growth and change, not just for the healing component, and alleviating suffering, but also because when we heal and when we alleviate our own personal suffering, the byproduct of that is our ability to receive love and peace and kindness from other people. But we have to heal ourselves first. And so, what this does is every single time I heal something, I get to experience more about what it means to be human in this world. Like, literally, God has this much for us to experience, and we get to experience this little bitty part that we've charted and set as a thing. And so when there's all of this other stuff out there, and I get to when I purge that other stuff and I'm open to receive what else is out there, then it's like that's where, like, oh wow, there's so much goodness that the world has that we can, and that's like anybody can have that. And that's not to negate or minimize people's suffering, but every single person I know that has love and peace and joy has gone through suffering to get there.
Yes.
There's not one person who's just been handed this perfect life and didn't have any suffering or anything that goes along with it. Like, every person who genuinely has it had to go through some suffering in order to receive it.
Yeah, and I really think that the more we can encourage others, and the more that we can do this ourselves, but the more we can encourage others to share about that, the more yeah, attainable or believable it becomes, because there are a lot of individuals who look as though they're living these really easy, painless, joyful lives. But every single individual who I've ever approached and asked them about that has told me a story about some really hard crap they went through.
Yes,
Every single one.
right.
There's not a single person who I've said, wow, you look really fulfilled. Like you are living your passion and your purpose. Tell me about it. And they're like, well, let me tell you about my dark night of the soul. Every time.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I think it gets down to that, um, that moment that we were describing where something happened to remind you that you're here. Something happened that you were like, "Oh my gosh, I have an opportunity. This is happening." And it's that moment that we talked about a couple of episodes ago where you can either ask yourself, this is that pivotal moment where you can just go back to the life that you had and just like keep working it, or you can say, what, like, what can I do from here? What's something different and new that I can learn from here, right? So I feel like this is a really good place to wrap it up. Um, Thank you for this conversation. I'm really excited. I know it's going to be something that we keep going back to. That's one of the things that I like about our discussions is just like you described with, like, I don't know, like, hey, that happened. Is this true? I feel like that's something that we're constantly willing to dive into, is
Yeah.
how something is constantly unfolding and evolving. And we're excited and holding it lightly.
'Cause I'm just this messy human over here with my paints making a mess and having a great time. And that's what it's about, is the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And special thanks to Asheville artist Melissa Moss for our cover art. You can learn more about her at melissamossart.com. And of course, thank you to Cloud Cult for letting us use their song, There's So Much Energy in Us, for our intro and outro music. Find out more about Cloud Cult at cloudcult.com. And of course, friends, thank you for listening. And until next time, peace, love, and light.